Welcome to Love and Speak the Truth, a podcast with Sister B and friends. Might get messy, sacred to secular. Don't judge. All voices will be heard here. So listen up. We're going to explore the human experience through the lens of wisdom sharing and faith, with a worldview that might shock you, move you, even downright inspire you. Today, we welcome Therese Barbato. Therese is my inspiration for moving into this podcasting venture. She's a mom, wife, actor, communicator, seeker, animator, facilitator, and a beautiful friend. Her wisdom is profound, earthy, articulate, informed, and genuine. She is the creator of the podcast, That's What She Said, where she interviews women from all around the world about our experience of love and loving. She is taking a hiatus from recording the shows, but keeps busy mothering and coaching. I am so happy to welcome Therese here today. Well, it's so great to see you, Therese. How are you?
I'm better. I'm better to see you and hear you.
Yes, well, it's really great to see you. And I am doing this podcast because of you. And you were my inspirer for trying to access this medium. And I think that one of the reasons I wanted to have a conversation with you on my podcast is because you influenced me to stretch myself, to allow myself to think beyond what I would normally think of myself being able to do. I think of you as a great communicator. I think of you as a person of great integrity, and you are so articulate. And I'm thinking, now I'm going to manage this. I'm going to try to keep up with you. So let's just start. I would love for people to know a little bit about you, beyond the fact that you're an actor. Is it actor or an actress? What does one say?
I think you can go either way. I think the technical thing now is actor for everyone, but it's not pejorative to say actress, I don't think.
Yes. Well, I like to think of you as an actor because I think you go beyond just the stage. I think that you are a person that enables, inspires people to become something more than they already project of themselves. Now,
You're really blowing me up at the beginning of this conversation, Brenda. I'm humbled, but
well, yes, but it's true. You know, sometimes you just have to. I'm not always sure I have the right words, but sometimes you have to spell it out so that people are clear where they stand with you.
Mm.
And you're way up there for me. So let us tell the audience. Just a quick aside. I was talking to another guest, and he said, "Oh, the audience of 5." So think of it this way: maybe just me and you today. Who
I think
knows?
it I think it is just you and me. I think the best conversations and podcasts are really just for you. And then because of that, people are interested to listen in. Do you know what I mean? But I think it should just be a conversation for us. And if other people find it interesting, they're welcome to join us. But I would sit down and talk to you for an hour literally any day. So this
Oh,
is a treat.
thank you. That's great, and I would definitely do the same. Um, what have you been up to these days? How have you been? And where are you in this moment in time? You know, the present is all we have. So
You're
we could just speak of the present.
God, that's a great question. Um, well, much of my present moment has to do with being a mother to a nearly 2-year-old, beautiful, chaotic hurricane of a child. So much of my daily life actually is in the present moment, because it's about, steaming apples and cleaning up spills and taking care of scraped knees and making sure she doesn't grab a knife out of the dishwasher. But truly, like, you have to be present to keep the baby alive.
Mhm.
So, so that's a lot of my daily life. It's quite small, it's like, it's quite quotidian. And then the other thing that I would lay on top of that is that, as you know, my dad died fairly recently, and my mom died when I was young. And so grief has been really present through my whole life. Grief is really, really present for me
Mhm.
in a daily way now. And those two things together, the active grief and the kind of gauze that puts over life, and the immediate unbelievable joy of being with a 2-year-old and seeing her play with a hose for the first time and deciding it's okay for her clothes to get drenched and to just solve the problem later because this is such an extraordinary moment.
Mhm.
The the two things are very much in dialogue with each other, and the one kind of feels in some ways like a respite from the other.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I would say those are like the primary things that I've got going on in the present moment.
And that place that you just mentioned, that you're in between this amazing joy of parenting and then the amazing valley of the shadow of loss that intermingles into the daily life of trying to live, you know, that is not a small world to be in. I have to admit to you, it's not a small world at all. It's huge. It's everything. Um, and I think even though it's at the center of your um, emotional, spiritual, physical life right now, um, that's that's the Paschal Mystery we church people talk about.
What is the Paschal Mystery?
Yes, the Paschal Mystery, in brief, is life, death, and resurrection, all rolled up, all going simultaneously. You know, life is all around us, isn't it? It's growing, much like Billy is growing. She was growing inside, now she's growing outside, and she's growing up. That's life. And then there's loss in the midst of it. Life doesn't stop, and then loss happens, right? Loss happens while life is going on. You know that. That's your big world we're talking about, right? And the resurrection is somehow you come out of that. And that is the constant of our being. It's the present. Anyway, so the one of the things I was interested in hearing uh, about your life is when you were doing that podcast, your whole focus was on love. Love was kind of the theme, all the different types of them, and so I'm just wondering. If that was your focus then, and your focus now is loving in a whole different and a very real way, being a mom, being a wife, being a working mom, a professional woman, all of that in the midst of life going hand in hand, you know. So, with that sort of backdrop of that focus that you had to bring to the world your different stories of love and love making and love giving, how does that come to life for you now as you take on this other role?
Mhm. I think when I was first making the podcast, which was conversations with women about love, I didn't know this at the time, but I was approaching it from a position of not understanding how it befell people, how people made it work. I think I was approaching it from a place of deficiency, actually, a place of, no, I don't say it critically, but just in a kind of a young girl way, like, I want to talk to as many women as possible and just like figure out how you do it. How do you find someone? How do you keep it going? And I was also at the time dating and seeking out love to, varying degrees of success. But when I think about it, I th- I think about it then as like this thing I wanted, this like story. Like love has always been very important to me. I've always like, I'll hear stories about politicians or, whoever, saints, whoever. And like my first thought will be like, well, I wonder if they had a partner. I wonder if they had a crush. I wonder if I'm, and at some point in my life, I realized not everyone was curious about that. Like at some point in my life, I realized like I was uniquely transfixed by the idea of relationships and people being together. And it always made a kind of sense to me, like the language of it and the truth of what makes it hard. It just always kind of felt like, oh, I speak this language. But anyway, I think I
Where
was
did that seeking come from, do you think? I'm just interested, like, how do you think you grew into uh, wanting to experience that? Yeah, yeah.
to wanting to experience love or to wanting to understand other
Understand it.
people's.
What,
Yeah,
yeah.
so there's a we don't have very many home videos of our family from when we were young because it just wasn't really done then, but there's one. I think I'm 4 years old and all my family, cousins, brothers and sisters are at a swimming pool on vacation. They're like running around, jumping in the water, like having the time of their lives. And I'm standing at the side of the pool with an inflatable, ring around me,
Mhm,
just slack jawed watching
mhm.
everybody for so long, Brenda, that like, it like becomes uncomfortable. Like I'm not, and watching it as an adult, I was like, oh my God, jump in the pool, talk to someone, do something. Like I was just staring. And I think in my more forgiving moments, like that has been my orientation toward the whole experience of life, watching other people, trying to absorb what other people are doing, curiosity about how other people are doing it, and if you want to push it to the extreme and say like at at the at the to the absence of my own ability to jump in the pool, define things for myself, etc.
Mhm,
But the other edge of that knife is the superpower I feel I have of profound empathy and profound understanding and
mhm,
profound ability to kind of enter other people's lives and spirits. And so it's both. And but I think I kind of had that youngest child, little girl, like how does everybody else do this thing orientation, like from way back.
yeah.
So then when it came to like developing into like a romantic and a sexual being, I think I continued to feel like, how do other people do this? Like how do married people do this? How do people in open relationships, like how does it work? How does it function? And that was kind of the journey of the podcast. I didn't even realize it, but I met my husband while I was doing the podcast, and I think in some ways those things were happening in tandem. I was doing anthropology around how love functions in people's lives, and I was on my path toward finding the relationship that actually became like the bedrock of my life and an organizing principle of not just my home, but really of like my whole life.
Mhm,
And in terms of your question, like what love has become now, it is no longer like something external that I'm like chipping away to try to discover.
mhm,
And more so, and this really does have to do with the moment of the season of my life that I'm in with Billy and with my daughter and having just lost my dad and now having lost both my parents. Like love is just the thread everywhere. It's like
mhm,
it's through my changing diapers and oatmeal, it's
mhm,
through my um connection with my family, it's through the ways in which I'm thinking about my friendships and how I want to continue to build them. It's like it went from, I think, being a thing I thought you like attained and
Mhm.
had
Mhm.
to something that's actually genuinely feels kind of like in the fabric,
Yeah.
in the fabric of everything. And I know from you, and one of my like my favorite things about you is the way you talk about like love is everything,
Mhm.
which is such a
Mhm.
like general idea and general. So that's a hard thing to hold on to. But the gift of how acute this moment is for me in grief and in parenting is that it's obvious. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's it is only love. It's only love. It's only the people that you love and the way you show that to them. But it's just in the air, it's in the inhale and exhale. It's in the way you touch someone's back. It's in that, like,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
everywhere.
Thank you for sharing that. It's the many examples that you just gave, and love is a metaphor for life. I think what I saw in you as a young girl, because I think I met you as a teenager, and what I saw in you then, and I see in you now in a much more developed and much more articulated way as a woman. Um, in this particular time, I see you as a seeker. Um, and I mean, we could, you know, say, okay, seeking love, seeking an understanding of love, but it's more than that. It's almost like, okay, your mom died at an early age, and your dad died at an older age, and these bookends someplace in between. But it's all of that I see, that you've been on this journey for, um, that realization of who you are as Trace. It isn't one particular thing. It's like coming out of your head, going into your heart, and now into the hands that have to change the diapers, to manage the different ups and downs of family and loss and whatever comes with that. But it's a very practical thing now, um, as well. It's, that existential understanding that we all somehow come to terms with, whether we like it or not, right?
Mhm.
Um, Nobody is going to say we need to have deep, deep loss in order to, you know, perceive in a different way. This is what happens,
Mhm.
and no way around it.
Only no way around it. No way out but through.
Through, exactly, through it. And wow, that's the essence of life. Because you can't say, oh, I want to be happy, so I'm not going to go through that. You know, uh, People struggle with, I think, depression, um, as loss. In the loss that gets mixed up in there is this, the sadness of not being able to go through. Yeah.
Well, and I think one thing I've really been struggling with about grief is that it feels like it happens to you. Do you know? It feels like it 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 happens to you. It falls upon you, and you're just kind of trying to survive it.
Hmm.
But I know about life somewhere else in my brain that there's choice. Do you know? There's
Hmm.
choice in how you receive loss. There's choice in how you integrate it into yourself. There's choice about not letting it shut you down or make
Hmm.
you hard. There is choice. But in early grief, it can be really, really difficult to see where there's choice. And there may not be at the very beginning,
Hmm.
but to me, it feels quite dangerous. Like, it feels quite important to remember that there's choice,
Hmm. Hmm.
as you move through it, because I think grief and so many things in life, like, it's very easy to feel like justified in whatever way you've hardened.
Hmm.
everyone can justify, the way that they've become the way that they are, but there's agency in our perspective, there's agency in our life. And one thing about my experience of grief is just like wanting to hold on to the thread of that, even through the suffering and through the sadness and the depression, like feeling like, remember, there's going to be a day where you feel like you can choose, actually, that you can look up and you can try to live with this, go through this with love, with hope, with a positive orientation toward this wild adventure that we're on, but there's a little work in there, to make sure that you don't go on autopilot when difficult things happen to you.
Somebody in your life must have in some way taught you or modeled to you how to hold that grief, because the thing about grief is, in my experience, I must say, I don't have any PhD in grief or anything like that. But the thing about grief is learning how to hold it. And it's like holding water though, isn't it? I mean, I think it's learning how to hold it and let it go through and realizing you still have, it's still there, you know?
I am seeing a therapist right now, and I kept saying to transcend this experience of grief, I want to transcend the experience of being someone who lost their mother at a young age and all that means. I want to transcend the sorrow that I currently feel. And this therapist really says very, very little in general. But at one point she interrupted me and she said, I don't think it's transcend. I think it's live with.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's what you're naming too.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Mm-hmm.
the idea that we are ever free of that suffering, that grief. It's a fiction.
Mm-hmm.
It's a living with. It's like, how do you hold it and not let it be you?
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Not somehow let it, drown you out of the life that you still have to give and to live and to be with,
Mhm.
that's great. I think that therapy simply put is a vehicle for working with it, for working with the things that you don't have enough space in you to hold it. And so
Mhm.
we get to invite somebody else to help us hold what it is too much for us to hold in that moment, you know? Um, yeah. Well,
And I also, while we're talking, I was thinking about, do you know the therapist Esther Perel?
mm,
She's a relationship therapist, and her parents were in the Holocaust. They were in concentration camps and survived. And she became this relationship sex therapist. She's like vibrantly alive. And she always talks about her parents and the people that they knew who had survived the concentration camps, that there were people who decided that they were done, that was too much suffering and kind of were just like a shadow of themselves for the rest of their lives. And then there were people who said, like, I'm going to live now,
yeah,
like with the life that I have left, I'm going
yeah,
to live. And I feel like that's the same thing. It's like you have every right to just give two middle fingers to life and say, like,
yeah,
screw you,
yeah, yes,
or you can choose to live somehow, even through that suffering. Somehow the invitation is still there to live. And I think that has to do with love.
yeah,
You know what I mean? That has to do with choosing the constructive, positive path.
mm-hmm,
It boggles the mind, but the choice is there, for
definitely,
everybody.
mm-hmm, definitely. It gives me pause. You just sometimes just have to stop for a second to take it in. Where do you think you get the strength? I could speak for myself, but where does the strength to right now you're called to mother, you're called to even before that birth something new, someone new, this beautiful little creature that is yours, that you created. Um, you're in the midst of giving life. But where can you, in your own being, one of the things in this podcast that I try to, in some way in the conversation, as people listen, hope that they will understand, is that we all will understand, because I continue to grow in understanding myself, is this idea that Teilhard de Chardin wrote about, and is that idea of we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and sort of flipped, that this is not the beginning and the middle and the end. This is the process of being. We're in a process of being. You know, it would be very easy for a parent to say, okay, now I'm done. You're molded. You're here. You're on the earth. You're walking to 2 arms, 2 legs, 10 fingers, and all this. You're created. You're done. But you're never really finished being created. So that from a spiritual perspective, a human being, we're limited in how we understand that. So where in all of this wondering and letting go and holding on and letting go again, where do you find meaning in that?
So that just made me think of two things. I don't know if these are direct answers to the question, but this is what came up. So Salman Rushdie, the writer, wrote that book, The Satanic Verses, I think in the 80s or 90s, and supreme leader of Iran essentially put like a hit out on him, and he because it was blasphemous in their eyes. And anyway, all that to say, he was a beloved writer for all these years. And then a couple years ago, he was giving a talk at this very well-heeled upstate New York Writers Institution and was stabbed like 30 times or something like that,
Yeah.
and was in just, I mean, I think the fact that he made it is a miracle, and blind in one eye and all of these physical ramifications from this experience. And just now
I saw an interview of
he's been doing a ton of interviews and talking about it. And the thing he said that has really stuck with me is like he spent his whole life thinking we are our consciousness. Like he was so intelligent, and the way he perceived the world, and writing these stories and teaching and whatever, like he really perceived that life was his mind, essentially, that the body was a vehicle of the mind. And in his physical despair and recovery since this terribly brutal attack, it's completely flipped. And he's like, we're just our bodies. we're completely constricted by these animal bodies that we're in. That's who's running the show. And the mind is, along for the ride, essentially. Like, he's like, everything is just like corporeal. Everything is just, we're animals. We're animals trying to survive, And the other thing, just as an aside, he said at one point, he's, I think, an atheist or agnostic or something. And he said in this interview, like, it was a miracle that I survived. And I don't really believe in miracles, but it was. And I found like a real resonance in his perspective. I'm not a faithful person. I really struggle with both the idea of like interpersonal faith and the idea of like capital F faith in something larger than myself. I really struggle with it. But I like the idea that you could perceive life as something where like you don't even really need to believe in it, and miracles could happen anyway. You know what I mean? Like, but anyway, those things are kind of opposite. The idea that we are just these animals, and that some other transcendence is possible and happening, and we don't necessarily need to believe in it for it to be so. Those two things seem true to me, like, and they don't even really feel like they connect, but there's something about that orientation toward the idea of faith and also being trapped. There's a relief to me in the idea that we're trapped in it, in an animal body. There's like to me that feels connected to the game of like, yeah, fight your 2-year-old daughter over a diaper change. Like, we're just stuck in this very simple animal experience, So that I get some sort of not strength from that, but I get some sort of organization of what this is from that. And then the other thing, this is like a little bit left of what you're talking about, but
A little left.
I had this experience having Billy in childbirth. I had been in labor for something like 32 hours at this point, and I was kind of finally to the stage where I was pushing, and I hadn't eaten in all that time, and I had barely slept, and I was exhausted and disheveled. And I mean, I felt like I had like been on an acid trip or something, just like completely disoriented. And I was trying to push. They were coaching me through pushing. And this doctor was like, "You're not doing it right, you know?" And I remember looking around the room at my husband, at our doula, at the doctors and the nurses and everybody. And I felt this feeling of like, can someone please just like tell me what to do? Like, someone please.
Mm, mm,
And then I had a moment of revelation where I was like, it's you. Like, no one can do this thing for you. Only you can do it.
mhm,
And that's lonely and sad and empowering and true. And like, there's been something about my life post that experience that feels like that's been a kind of spine of the whatever the second act of my life post Billy is like that feeling of when you're young, you have this expectation that people can help you and do things for you and come and pick you up after you scrape your knee and all of that.
mhm,
They know more than you know. And then I think you get to a point in life, or I don't know, I got to a point where I felt like I had like a transcendent experience of like, no one can do it for you. No one can do life for you.
mhm,
It's your experience, you know? And I think that's a funny reaction to you asking about like where I get the strength to do all these things. Because what I believe about life is that we're stronger together.
mhm,
This, you and I talking here, is always going to be 1,000 times richer than you or I alone in a room. You know, it's like, it's the
mhm,
togetherness that creates the magic, and it's the togetherness, you know, that's greater than the sum of its parts. And that's true in relationship, and that's true in family and community. Like, I believe in all that.
mhm,
And I feel this very strong, I think, animal feeling that's like, it's you.
mhm,
You have to build your life. No one is going to come and do it with you, for you,
mhm.
etc. But I struggle with faith. I mean, and I think you and I have talked about that before. I struggle. I wish that I was a more faithful person. I think it would make the experience of living more less tight.
Mhm, mhm. Well, it gives it, you said it perfectly. I said that those very same words I said when I was a teenager, and my friend said, "Why do you always go to mass all the time?" And going to mass. I don't think I was even Catholic at the time. And and I said, "Well, brings a little order to my life, gives me a little structure." And I think my brain works that way when I know the lines uh, within which I must travel the journey. It helps me. I'm less that now. At 67, I'm less needing of the order, because your description that you just gave me is why I think that there's more feminine to God than masculine. I envision a God giving birth.
Mhm.
It's painful. It's sometimes downright ugly. You know what I'm saying? And this God, even in the midst of that pain and that loving into life, you know, she has to live with uh, being on her own, but surrounded, by other creations that helps as this new life comes to being.
Mhm. I love that.
You know something? I think people often, and maybe this is not you, but I've heard this through my journey of listening with others. People often think of faith and connect it, sometimes synonymously with dogma. It's like, okay, these are the rules. I don't get along with those rules. That doesn't resonate with my life. But faith is, I think a better word is hope. I think the best word is love, because that's the incarnation of faith for me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that I think that image of your um, giving life, bringing life into the world is really what it's all about. And all the rest of it is surviving that birthing, you know, somehow keeping the life giving going. I'm just grateful for the many ways that I see you, admire you moving through a life that is so illuminating of creativity, of bringing life into the world for your family too. I see you as a real animator in that sense, you know, which is a really good thing to facilitate life, to be one that continues to be a co-creator of life. Mm? Now, I wanna ask you if there's anything that we talked about today that you would want to reflect back on me and ask me.
Yes, that's a great question. I was thinking about faith, what you said, the better word is hope, the best word is love. I think of faith, if I could have it, as surrender. Like there's this great comedian who says about being an atheist, like it's exhausting to be your own God.
Yeah.
The people in my life who have faith, yourself very much included, there's a kind of surrender because you know you're not in control. That to me is what's aspirational about faith. And I wonder, is my perception of that, of your relationship to it, right? Does that part of the experience of faith come easily to you? The surrender, the sense that there's something else or somebody else
Hmm.
before, above, and beyond. Does that come naturally, or is that something you work at?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I do work at it. I'm not always conscious of working at it. But I think one of the things that helped me to see faith as something essential in my life is that we are beings that need connection. It can't just be me. I don't want a world. I don't want a life. I don't want an existence without connection. Um, and I think what we've done with it as human beings is we've become sort of the negative side of codependent. We entrap other people into thinking they're in charge of our happiness, our development, our loving natures. We're responsible for that. But we need the connection in order to feel whole. And I think that's what faith does. It says, I'm I'm this little piece of a much bigger thing, of a much bigger reality, that my little space in my little fat round body is not all there is, you know, that there's more of me because you're here. There's more of us because your dad, whom I loved and you adored, because he was here. there's so all of that to me is faith. It's it's like it's okay that I'm Brenda and I'm responsible for Brenda, but I think the God thought or the thought of something more is about that. It's about connection. And that's why I think so many people belong to churches because they think they can find their connection in the church, you know, or in a lot of people find it in the dogma, the rules. Yeah. If I'm doing this, then I belong. So I'm not sure if it's natural or not natural. It's that one drop thinking philosophy. We are the ocean and we're not the ocean. You know, we're one drop in it. And the faith is that we're a part of something bigger. We're part of something more. For me, that God figure that we talk about is extremely personal, and I see it. I see it in everybody. I see it in the people that I don't know, and I see it in myself. and I'm still getting to know who I am. So it's all in that whole revelation of being. I don't know if that answers it, but for me, it's all about connection. Faith is being connected to something bigger and also recognizing that I'm broken. We're all broken because we've kind of fallen. It's like when your baby came into the world and you finally pushed her out. Now she's in the cold.
Right.
She's no longer that intimate, safe,
Warm, safe.
warm, connection of you. She's now out there in the cold. So that becomes a whole new reality. And so all of us need something to put us back there, to give us that sense of wholeness. And that's what it's like for me. And it's not something that I wouldn't have said this at 40. I wouldn't have said it at 25. At 67, this is where I've come to. Make sense? Or
Hmm.
crazy?
No, makes the most sense. I mean, this is what you're describing is what I love about theater. That's why I went into theater. It's the same. It's like you get to be a part of something that becomes something because of all the parts of it,
Hmm.
but you're just a part of it, you know?
Yeah.
You're all working together towards something outside of yourself. And there's a kind of flow and a kind of like ease and grace that happens when you get to do that, you know?
And that's the little stage. And then there's the universe.
Right.
And we all get to be a part of that action,
Right.
isn't it? All right. Well, I continue to be in gratitude for this time together, but it also has to come to a little conclusion. And so what I would like to finish up with is when we wrap this up, we don't finish the conversation. We just keep thinking about what we heard, what we learned, what we noticed in ourselves. But I would like to come to a little conclusion of this time together by asking you. The name of this particular podcast is "Love and Speak the Truth." So we've heard a little bit about a loving and the truth of your life, um, and the truth of my life. What is, say, one truth that has sustained you through your life, or one truth that comes to you as you end this conversation? It doesn't have to be profound; it just has to be you.
I'm glad you gave me a little warning on this question because just a little bit of time actually helped me think of something, which is in my graduate studies, I had a movement teacher who was profound, unbelievable teacher in every way. His name is Moni Yakim, and it's all the things that you know about incredible teaching. Like, he didn't tell you what to do. He knew exactly how to help inspire people to learn themselves. There was an incredible rigor around what he taught, and it was incredibly challenging, but it was also playful and you could measure like what you were learning from him. I mean, just like teaching in its most pure and profound
Mm-hmm.
state. And there was a documentary crew trying to capture his teaching style and methodology. And so all the time I was in school with him, there was this documentary crew. And I remember another teacher in the department saying that it was so important that people were trying to document what Moni could do because otherwise that kind of teaching is only written in the bodies of the people who have studied with him.
Mm-hmm.
And that phrase has stayed with me always. It's written in our bodies, because so much of life and the experiences that we have and the relationships that we have are ephemeral and they go away and you don't have evidence of them. You don't have proof of them, but they are written in our bodies. And so when I think about like the main struggle I think I have of living is like, what am I doing? What is the impact? What is the measurable life? Like when I die, like what will we be able to say that life was or accomplished? And I don't feel this yet, but I aspire to live in harmony with the idea that the way I've treated people around me is written in their bodies. And then hopefully, in Billy's child's body, and that's enough. to be good to people, to love people, and to know that you can't always like see and measure that, but that it's written in people's bodies, and that becomes a part of their lives and their children's lives and their communities' lives, and that is enough.
Awesome.
That's a truth that I aspire to.
It's written in our bodies. Yes. True.
Oh,
So much.
Brenda, thank you. You took all this time complimenting me and telling me all these wonderful things about myself, and I didn't have the time to return them, but I love you, and you inspire me and always make me feel more expansive and more thoughtful and more curious, and always, 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 always listened to, which I think is the rarest thing in life. So I appreciate knowing you, and I appreciate spending time with you, and I appreciate you inviting me into this conversation.
Oh, thank you so much for our mutual love and our mutual understanding that life would be less good without you in my life. So
God bless
much.
you.
And now for the wrap up. You have just had a human experience from a spiritual being. We have so much to learn. So go forth to love and speak the truth. Ad majorem Dei gloriam. A couple of announcements. Don't forget to rate and follow us on Apple Podcast or Spotify. We are on Facebook at Love Speak Truth, and visit our website at www.lovespeaktruth.org. For a few credits, when all is said and done, I give thanks and credit for sponsors, producers, and contributors who made this podcast possible. Mega shout out to IBVM Region Leadership, Megan Butel, Jennifer Schmitz, Carol Benaziak, Laurenti Wright for the keyboard music, the late Sister Maria Beer IBVM for her composition of the music Women Bearing Witness. It takes a village, folks. Thanks for listening to Love Speak Truth.